You're listening to the Friday edition of the Shed Geek Podcast, brought to you by Shed Geek Marketing. At Shed Geek Marketing, we've assembled a hand-picked team of specialists from across the shed and portable building industry to help manufacturers, dealers, and service providers grow smarter and scale faster. From websites and SEO to Google Ads, meta campaigns, content creation, video production, lead funnels, systems integrations, and industry-specific lead gen tools, we help businesses build real momentum instead of chasing random marketing trends. Today, Shed Geek Marketing is holding down this title sponsor spot at the top of the show, but this could just as easily be your company, featured right here in front of thousands of industry professionals, business owners, and decision makers every single week. If you'd like information about title sponsorship, podcast advertising, or our 2026 Shed Geek Media Kit, reach out to us at info@shedgeek.com. And now, on to the podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Shed Geek Podcast. I am coming to you from Metropolis, Illinois. Beautiful weather here at Shed Quarters. We have just been so blessed with great weather and sunny days, and even a little bit of rain for the farmers, which was much needed there for a little while. Today, I am joined by Till, and I will save the pronunciation of his last name until he can jump in and help me with it. But Till from Tiny Easy over in Auckland, New Zealand. It's going to be a great show. 3D builder for tiny homes, something that is, we know this, that is, getting closer and closer to the shed industry. The leads are overlapping. So looking forward to this show after talking with Till last week and realizing the value that is there for the shed industry. But before we get rolling, just a couple of quick things so you know how to stay plugged in with us. As you know, as always, the Shed Geek phone line, aka Shannon's personal cell phone number. Give him a call or a text, 618-309-3648. Shoot us an email, info@shedgeek.com. Of course, you can go to the contact form there at that same address, www.shedgeek.com. We always want to encourage everyone to be active with both the Shed Geek Facebook page as well as the groups within the industry. Of course, the Shed Sales Professionals page, which we help to admin. We think that offers so much value. Get on there, be active, ask questions. But all the other pages as well. Just a great community and so fulfilling whenever you participate in it. The call-in line. So for anyone out there who has plain community neighbors or friends, or anyone who would just like to enjoy the Shed Geek podcast from that call-in line system, that number is 330-997-3055. So please spread the word on that and let your neighbors know. We always like to be as accessible as possible. We've heard that there was a little bit of feedback on that call-in line. So please, if you are listening to us via the call-in line and there is still feedback, please give us a call, 618-309-3648. Let us know that is coming through either crystal clear, like we hope in your area, or whether we still need to be troubleshooting that in particular parts of the country. So having said all of those things, lots of updates today, Till.
Great work.
But if that's the extent of the work of a podcaster, then I guess I'll live with it. But so for all of you listening, I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Till Buch. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you did it perfectly. Awesome, Coach. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And of course, we already had a chat last week, and it's a pleasure to get to know you and the team. And of course, I heard already a lot about the podcast already at the time. And yeah, it's just a pleasure to be on today and have a bit of a chat and see what I can do on my end to share the knowledge that we've got from our industry. And yeah, just dive more into the shed industry, of course, on that side as well. And yeah, if there's anything that we can do to help out, fantastic. And otherwise, yeah, just really looking forward to have a chat with you.
Very good. And we had so much fun last week. We are both, I think, fair to say, shed geeks, shed nerds, tiny home nerds, tiny structure nerds. And we both have odd German last names.
Yeah.
B-U-C-H for you and K-O-C-H for me. I joke sometimes with the listeners that my family was good enough Germans to keep the spelling, but not the pronunciation. So we still go with cook. But just for this episode, and just to honor you and the German language, I will be Cord Koch for the day. Right? So just a couple German fellas talking about tiny homes today. Very European of us for being a New Zealander and an American, um, but
Absolutely.
so Till, tell the listeners. I know that you're obviously very passionate, about Tiny Easy, a 3D configurator for tiny homes specifically. But I also know just from speaking with you last week that you seem like you've been a trailblazer and innovator for a while. Obviously passionate not only about the tiny homes and the structures and that part of it, but about the software and about the user interface and the user experience. And you just seem like you've got so much energy and vitality around these things. So tell us, Till, tell us about yourself and how you have wound up in this specific industry, but maybe also what that path looked like and where does all that energy come from, my friend?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Herr Koch. Really appreciate it.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
of course. Yeah, just just to give you a bit of a background, I guess, where I came from and also how we got into the tiny home space and where the passion comes from. So just, I mean, like you already said, I am a German myself, but we actually came to New Zealand way back in the day, and this is more of a personal background. But yeah, we came to New Zealand back when I was 13 together with my family and settled here in New Zealand. And it's an absolutely beautiful country and love it out here. And we just love the fact that there's so much countryside here, many natural spaces, not that many people. And of course, coming from Germany, having so many people over there, it's of course an amazing country and love the family that we've got over there as well. But in New Zealand, it's just that more relaxed lifestyle that we absolutely love over here as well. And yeah, we've built our life over here now and for many, many years now, and really love New Zealand, love the country and the people out here. And yeah, really how it all started. We initially got introduced to tiny homes, I think back when I was 16, which is ages ago now. But we initially had the idea of one day we wanted to build a tiny home for ourselves, or I wanted to build a tiny home for myself. And I also have a brother, or actually a twin brother, that looks exactly like me. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you know me, you already know him. And he wanted to build a tiny home as well and got into the tiny home space. And we were actually introduced to Living Big in a Tiny House, Bryce Langston, who has a really popular YouTube channel. And we actually met up with him way back in the day when he was building his tiny house on wheels. And he was showing us through the tiny home that he was building at the time. I think it was still in the framing stage then. And that really sparked our interest in the tiny home space. And then just fast forward a couple of years, my brother actually started working in the tiny home industry for a tiny home builder out here in West Auckland in New Zealand. And he helped out in the workshop together with his partner, who's also now the co-founder of Tiny Easy too. And so essentially, yeah, he built tiny homes, helped paint them, finish things up, as well as in the end draw plans for the tiny home business and really more focus on the drafting side and putting together concept plans for clients, putting together building plans for the builders in the workshop. So really got into the tiny house space really organically. Again, fast forward a couple more years, he actually built his own tiny home on wheels that he lived in for a couple of years, and he actually even had a home office that he used to work in to make Tiny Easy. So it's a true tiny home business, in a way, run from tiny homes, starting out in the tiny home space. And so essentially, where the idea for Tiny Easy stemmed from is being in the small home space, working literally hands-on with tiny home builders. We have seen that the industry itself is fairly analog still, and there's not necessarily any tools built around helping builders design, sell, quote, these kind of spaces. And in the long run, we have built Tiny Easy to solve all of those problems. And of course, with any business, you start small and you solve one problem, and then over time you learn more and more and you work with more customers. And now we're blessed to be working with hundreds of tiny home and ADU and modular home and even some shed businesses that also work in the tiny home space specifically. And of course, we have been learning what it is that we need to do to help solve more and more problems. And now we're at a point where we have different solutions in the space to help builders in these different parallel industries to get clients into the door from their website with a configurator, which is of course very well known in the shed space, but it also goes further, and we have a software to build customized homes for clients. So it's a drag and drop system to create customized designs, which is essentially, if you're thinking about it, an IKEA kitchen planner, but specifically made for the small home space. And then it goes further into creating renders, creating walkthroughs, creating PDF plans, takeoffs, and then putting it all together in a proposal that you can then send to the client. So we're kind of trying to solve the entire sales journey from getting the lead into making a customized proposal and then closing the deal. And that's kind of where we have ended up over all of those years in Tiny Easy. And we are fortunate enough to be working with builders all over the world now, not just in New Zealand, but we're out in Australia, we're out in the US, we're out in Canada, some in Europe as well. And so it's something that we have been growing for 6 years now. So it's been a journey and a half, to say the least.
Yes, absolutely. And like you said, you solve one problem, and all you really do is realize that there's 1,000 more, right? And thankfully for companies like yours, companies like Shed Geek in a lot of ways, and certainly for companies like the partners that we have in the industry, it's a good thing that problems keep coming up. So so that
Absolutely, yeah.
so that they can keep getting solved and continue to grow that overall value. But that's, as I'm just listening to that sort of background there, it strikes me that this is a very New Zealand story, I think, right? I mean you move over as a kid at 13, and by 16 your mind is on, I just need to build myself a tiny home and live out in the wilds, live out in the wilds of New Zealand. I'll put it right there, either on the beach or maybe on the side of a mountain, whatever it might be. And kind of living that life that is more in tune, more simple, which I think that lots of people are yearning for these days. Both to unplug, from the rigors of modern life, but also just financially. These tiny home structures have really begun to replace, the single story ranch house, right? I mean,
absolutely.
At this point, a single story ranch, on a slab in the U.S. is going to run you. I mean, gosh, I guess it depends on driveway and, like cutting the curbs and like all the details, but, probably in the neighborhood of 200, 180, 200, $220,000. And it has just become, inaccessible, particularly in the U.S., but, by my understanding in large swaths of the world. I'm not sure that New Zealand, I think that New Zealand is encapsulated in some of that as well. By my understanding, but it really, I think one of the core value propositions, like the problem that you're solving. Obviously, you want the customer facing side, and you want that sort of lead magnet. In the shed industry, we know, some of us know, even though we don't provide any any tiny homes whatsoever, don't claim to, don't nothing, but somebody's ready to turn that shed into a tiny home. So we wind up, a lot of shed sellers out there wind up getting those leads that come to their doorstep, and it's just kind of like, I can sell you the shell, and like I suppose you can finish it how you'd like, and here's a contractor's name. We don't do it, in a lot of cases. But I think the other side, as you said, really is much to do with where your brother started. It sounds like, in the drafting side, in the compliance side, because one of the biggest challenges, I think, in for a lot of companies, in even considering whether or not they would do anything in the tiny home realm. We all know that the money's out there. the margins out there. Obviously the unit sale value, 10x's or 15x's, on that sort of tiny home finish out. But I think what a lot of people are hesitant about is the compliance side. It is how many different codes, how many different drafts, how many different blueprints are we going to need to submit? How much hand holding do we have to do with our clients to make them feel comfortable, maybe with going and presenting that to their zoning officials or zoning board themselves? So maybe, maybe this is diving a little deep in the weeds for the first follow-up question, but how does Tiny Easy really address that sort of all of the consternation and hesitancy that comes with the tiny home industry in general, not just the pretty pictures? We all like the pretty pictures. Who doesn't like a pretty picture? But how do you feel like you guys kind of deal with those, the 99th problem and the 100th problem and the 101st problem,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Unlock the power of productivity with Cardinal Leasing. Are you looking to elevate your business operations with top-tier equipment? Look no further than Cardinal Leasing. We offer a wide range of reliable and high-quality equipment tailored to meet your unique needs. Flexible leasing options. Whether you need short-term rentals or long-term solutions, our customizable leasing plans are designed to provide maximum flexibility and affordability. Conventional financing available. Cardinal Leasing also offers great conventional finance options for those of you that prefer that over-lease purchase options. Expert support. Our team of experienced professionals is here to guide you every step of the way, ensuring a seamless leasing experience. Boost efficiency. With our top-of-the-line equipment, you can enhance productivity, reduce downtime, and achieve your business goals faster. Why choose Cardinal Leasing? Competitive rates, exceptional customer service, hassle-free process, quick and easy approvals. Don't let outdated equipment hold you back. Partner with Cardinal Leasing today and take your business to the next level. Contact us now. Visit our website at equipment.cardinalleasing.us or call us at 618-803-4086 to get started.
That's a great question. And I think there was a couple of really interesting things that you've just mentioned there. And of course, the tiny home movement in general, how it came to be and how it is different, but also parallel to the shed industry. Of course, there's really different solutions to the problem of the housing crisis, just to kind of step back a little bit there. And from what we've seen being in this industry, similar to what you are with Shed Geek, you have a very interesting overview of the industry and the movement and the different, approaches that builders have to solving those problems. And really what we've seen is there's different applications that you can have to solving those problems. And there could be ADUs, granny flats, cabins, sleep outs, garden offices, all the way to tiny homes and park models. And that also ties into your next question, really, of the regulations. Every single solution has different pathways in order to be able to get that through, depending on the legislation that you're under. And it really depends, of course, on what kind of offering that you're looking to have. But specifically in the tiny home space, in the ADU space, there's specific regulations that you need to adhere to and you need to plan around specifically. And what we mainly take care of with Tiny Easy is solving the problem of understanding what is it that the client wants and being able to get a concept together quickly without having to initially engage a draftsperson to be able to get something down on paper. So the builder can do that initial ideation themselves without waiting on that feedback loop, essentially. So a client comes into the door and says, okay, I love your sheds, but I don't actually want this specifically, but I would love to have, let's say, a park model or an ADU for my property, and I really like the projects that you do, and I would like to work with you. And where we come in specifically is our software helps you create a design if that is what you're looking to do. So usually it works a little bit differently I'd say in the ADU in tiny home space. Most of the time you don't actually start from scratch, but you actually have a preset amount of floor plans that you have already come up with ahead of time to show, look, this is my staple range, this is what you can choose from, and then you would modify that to the client's needs. And then you can shape the idea of the client into something that is actually buildable with the experience that you have, and you're doing that quickly using the tooling that we have, so you can then visualize it in 3D, show the client, hey, this is your concept, this is what it looks like, here's some realistic renders that go with it so you can imagine it, here's a walkthrough that you can experience so you can again understand it in 3D, here's a whole proposal document that runs through our costing estimate and our process, what our business is about, essentially providing that sales experience. And then once you have something that the client is happy with and works for them works for their specific project, that's when we work into the handoff process of taking it to that next further step once you know what is it that concept that the client actually wants. And we have different tooling to be able to provide something to the next stage. And again, because we work in so many different places in the world, every process is different. But really what's important for us is how can we get the information out of the software? So that could be exporting 3D models, generating PDF plans, or generating a takeoff that explains the materials that are in the design. So depending on what process comes afterwards, you can then interpret that information further. And again, it really depends if you're in the granny flat ADU space or if you're in the tiny home space and what regulations you need to go to. But most of the time, if you do go through a legislation body that requires some sort of approval process, then you would take the concept, you would take the plans that you have already created, and you would send that to a draftsperson that is working in the space or in the area that you're in that has knowledge of that space, and then can interpret that design and make it work specifically for this area and for the codes and requirements that you have. But in the end, you have cut out that initial process of going back and forth with the client, and only the final product that you know is something that the client wants. You then invest into the time spent, but that cuts out time, but at the same and also money, of course, that the client then doesn't have to spend, which would blow up the budget for the client, meaning it makes it less likely for the client to actually go through with you. So that's where we slot in and how we solve the problem when it comes to the regulations that are attached to the space. Again, there's so much more to talk about. I'm sure we will cover some of it as well. But that is the long story short of how that works specifically for us and how we see the workflow work.
The tools are provided. You know, what is that next step in regulation? Well, it's different depending where you are, but the data is accessible in a multitude of different ways that allows you, you know, as the builder, or allows the client or whatever that process looks like, to extrapolate that info and then carry on to that next step. I mean, that in and of itself is you know, ideal for all of us out there who are, you know, trying to work with zoning and trying to you know, comply you know, with some of the regulations that are out there, you know, especially as you get into you know, suburbs and everything like that. But even, you know, there are a lot of just counties, rural areas, you know, around the country that have fairly strenuous you know, zoning requirements. Even in rural areas and things like that. So, you know, I think we had kind of spoken just a bit about some of the overlap between sheds and tiny homes and the way that they're marketed and, you know, the way that they're used as tools. It sounds like the way that you're describing, you or your customers find that probably using when it comes to tiny homes, using it more as that consultative tool versus, you know, a lot of times in sheds. Now, of course, the sales team will pick up a shed design, you know, call the person back. But a lot of times, you know, it is, if they've already chosen their colors and the roof, and, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of a box, right? So you can more or less design the features you want and just kind of turn it in. where it sounds to me like the way that you all advise your clients, or the way that the sales process works, for Tiny Easy, is you encourage that much more consultative, let's build this together type of an approach. Am I right about that, Till?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's simply a difference in the industries. So from what we've seen specifically in the shed industry, what works really well is that you have different styles for sheds that really determine the finish or the shape, and the little touches that make it or give it that look that you want in the end, and to fit it to the house, for example, that you have, fitting the colors, the finishes that go with that, picking the size, maybe picking where the doors and windows go, and really thinking about the layout as a whole, and thinking about the structure, the size of it, and what goes into it. But because the way that sheds are designed, you are able to do most of that in a builder process that the client can do themselves. Once the client is then ready, like what you said, there's not necessarily that many changes that you need to do, and you can technically order it directly from that online experience. And that's where shed configurators and online shed configurators do a really good job, because they have solved that problem perfectly. And of course, there's different suppliers in software that do that, and we admire that, seeing that from a parallel industry, how well they have solved those problems. And specifically for the tiny home and park model in granny flat or ADU industry, whatever you want to call it, depending on what niche you are in, it's just simply a different approach. Rather than saying, look, here are different styles, pick a size, and then maybe add your windows, add your finishes. It's more about, okay, can we pre-design a range of models for specific purposes that we know works well? So it's, if you're thinking about it, let's say, can we have 5 to 10 different floor plans at different sizes that works? Because if you scale a floor plan, there might be some elements that you want to take over, but it will just simply will not work at all different sizes, because it needs to be purpose designed for the space that you have. And so specifically also going back to the regulations, what a lot of builders do is they pre-design specific floor plans with regulations in mind. So for example, there are specific regulations where you can't go over 400 square meters because not square meters, square feet. Again, I'm from New Zealand, so but 400 square feet. So, for example, if you go above that in certain areas, then you trigger something, so you want to stay below that. Then the next level is 700 square feet, so you want to design some floor plans that go to that size. And then the next size up is 1200 square feet. So you kind of have these different stages of floor plans that make sense for those different steps of regulations. And then really what we have seen from a sales process, rather than giving the client the tooling to do everything themselves, the tooling that we give clients is something to explore and dream at the start, and then lead them into a more guided sales process that a salesperson can work with them. So putting it into the shed industry's terms, once you have designed your shed, on the configurator online, you actually go into the next stages of the process that you as a builder would do, and you technically wear your salesperson's hat to then figure out the next stages of the process. So you would, let's say, come up with a configured design that is a good starting point for the client, but then you can take it further. So you can understand, okay, do we want to switch around some window arrangements, because on the side of that client there might be a view on this side, so we need to change this, or there's a specific neighbor that's overlooking the ADU that will be built here, or the park model that will be built, so we need to change for that, or it needs to be flipped around because, again, the arrangement of the design might not work with a side. Then you can go into further design specifications that go more about the interior finish as well, because that is an element and a dimension that's not necessarily existing in the shed space. So, for example, what styling do we want? What cabinetry finishes do we want? What handholds? So more picking the final finishes and making it work for the client. And in the end, a tiny home has a higher average order value than a shed, of course. So having that more hands-on, high-touch sales process is what really works, unless you have, let's say, figured out a process where you've got your business to a scale where you're building 500 homes per year and you've really got it down and you know exactly what the options are. At that point, you can almost have a configurator that has all of those options available. But until then, a more consultative sales process is really what works for, let's say, 99% of builders that we work with and that work in the industry in general. And you will find a big overlap from builder to builder that approaches it this way.
Yeah, I think in the industry, just about, every builder, even most, shed sales people, they're being approached. Obviously, they're trying to find solutions for their customers. I think just about everyone at this point has had some level of finish out, whether that be from the manufacturer, like directly, from the plant where those are being finished out, which, several companies are continuing to walk forward in that way, or whether it be from local contractors who then jump in and kind of, either formally or informally, are then kind of doing some of that as well. I think that most all shed industry people have tried to help find those types of solutions, because as you said, whenever you just go to a strict, size, and style, obviously most builders out there are providing sizes and styles that make, good looking tiny home structures. So then it's just about, figuring out, like, who actually does the work of the finish out. How much is it? Does it make financial sense to do it this way versus that way? And so everyone is kind of, I think, just everyone is finding their way right now, right? There's an obvious gap in the market. I think that tiny homes have a certain cachet, for the same reason that a 16-year-old, Till, hip kid in Auckland, wants a tiny home. Like it has that sociological effect that a manufactured home does not in a lot of consumers' minds. It's actually social signaling. So it has that sort of psychology built into it where people want it and they get the savings. So I think most companies are trying to figure out how to at least tap into that, even if they don't want to do the full finish out at the plant, because that would require, X number of more, bays, or you'd have to change your production process from start to finish. But maybe if you don't mind sharing, you've had some experience with some American builders now. So I'm just curious, like, are these shed people who are, tiptoeing and have, found their way into tiny homes? Are these startup tiny home businesses? Like, tell us about how it's obvious that you've had, a success all around the world, but just to bring it home to the listeners, here of the Shed Geek podcast, like, tell us a little bit, as much as you can share or are comfortable sharing, about some of the successes that you've had, here on this side of the Pacific.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are really seeing a mix when it comes to the companies that we work with, and there's definitely shed builders specifically that are also getting into the tiny home park model, ADU, granny flat space to diversify. So we are working with quite a few of those companies just simply because there is that requirement to get a different production line in, or not necessarily a production line, but a different offering that differentiates you from different businesses, right? So tiny homes are on the rise. More space is required. People are putting spaces into their backyards, or they want to downsize, or it is a good starter home. There's, again, so many applications for it, and the industry itself is booming. And so it makes a lot of sense that builders that are already building structures and have the skills, they have the team, they have the craftsmanship. Okay, if we can do this, then we can also do this other side, which goes further essentially, and you're more developing pre-built homes that you can deliver, right? And the thing that we're seeing actually quite often, that they end up with two different lines that they offer to customers. So they keep the sheds, which is the proven line that is working and is getting the majority of the business, and then they can start out and develop out that tiny home offering or ADU offering to get that additional revenue to diversify. And this is really, really where we're seeing the success, because it doesn't necessarily take a lot of upfront input to get set up in this space. When it comes to a software side, for example, it's not expensive at all to get started. So it's fairly easy to say, okay, let's trial this different line. Let's see if this is working, and let's see if we can get some customers into the door here. And so that is the kind of the shed builder approach, where you have the dual offering, which is coming up more and more with Tiny Easy. And then, of course, we have the dedicated businesses that are only doing tiny homes, that are only doing ADUs, and that is happening also just as much, where they are only focusing specifically on those structures. So we might, let's say, have ADU builders in California who are building pre-designed models. They might have 5 to 12 different floor plans that it's possible actually that they have a manufacturer that develops these off-site for them. So they actually are more of a reseller and working with the client to be able to sell these ADUs and making sure that they've got leads coming in, and they're using a configurator to sell that. That is very successful. Or we've got the builders that are building their own range that they have designed themselves, and they are building it themselves in their workshop. And just like with sheds, they have built their own production line where they have different bays to finish these homes out. And there could be smaller businesses that might have, let's say, 3 to 4 bays, all the way up to massive businesses that are building 300, 400, 500 of these units a year. So it's just, it really depends on what scale you're at. And then there's also the builders that are only doing, let's say, 1 every 3 months. That also totally happens. And it just really depends on the scale that they're at. So I guess to answer your question in a short manner, it's both. You have the shed builders that are pivoting and are adding to their product offering, and then there's the dedicated businesses that are seeing that it is working, and they are fully focused on this industry specifically.
Shed builders, if you're looking to boost efficiency and improve your truss and component production, you need to know about iFab LLC. We've been building shop-tested, builder-approved equipment since 2011, and we specialize in reliable, durable solutions for real-world shed manufacturing. From truss presses and our adjustable jig to the precision door table, forklift building movers, and 3-point building movers, iFab equipment is designed to help small shops and large production operations run smoother. And if you haven't seen our latest truss saw system, you're missing out on some major upgrades, like an integrated stop system, pneumatically automated slider saw, integrated scrap conveyor, and a standalone elevating conveyor. These innovative options are helping shops cut faster, cleaner, and more consistently than ever. Whether you're expanding production or tightening up your workflow, we're here to help. Visit iFab LLC to explore our machines or give us a call. Let's talk about improving your shop. iFab LLC, simple, innovative solutions for the shed industry.
Right. So you had mentioned earlier that you'd even called it the tiny home movement, which I think is awesome. Whenever, like, industries and jobs and software now and all those supportive roles kind of grow up out of exactly that, a movement. And so maybe it might kind of help because when you say builders, tiny home builders who are kind of like entering the market exclusive into tiny home, to me, it feels like, those must be people that are obviously coming more out of that movement, I would think. I could see where maybe a home builder would just realize that maybe it makes sense to be a little more modular with the home builds, but home builders are home builders. They want to go pour foundations. Like they like the big work. They like the neighborhoods. They like that side of it. So I would imagine that more of the startup tiny home shops are coming from people sort of like the van life movement, right? It's like it's a way of living, and so then businesses spring up around it. You're obviously, it seems like you're steeped in it. You've been around it for a long time, and now obviously work in it and interact with some of the biggest and best companies in it. So maybe just from your perspective, like if you were just going to explain what that movement is, to the sort of more average shed builder, which I think is a much more practical, obviously the roots of shed building, in America goes back to yard barns, deeply intertwined with Amish Mennonite plain community, roots there that has now grown obviously to encompass, non-Amish, non-Mennonites as well, but deep roots there, but certainly a practical approach. And maybe you would say that the tiny home approach is practical as well, but it just seems a little eccentric, in its roots as compared to, I just want my shovels to be somewhere where they don't get rained on and wind up rusty.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting movement, I would say. And the key reason why it has started, and of course, there's a lot of different reasons, but I would say the main reason is housing affordability is becoming an issue, and it is so tricky for someone entering the housing market, for example, buying a place for, let's say, putting it into New Zealand terms. In Auckland, of course, conversion rates will be a thing, but it's very common in Auckland that a house will cost $1 million for a starter home, which is converted to over, let's say, 700K USD. And so that is very common over here. And so that already is not affordable to a lot of people. They cannot afford the mortgages. So reason one, people can't afford regular housing. They want to have something that is smaller, more affordable. The good thing is when you go to the full tiny home and wheel approach, that means you can get a trailer, you build a home on top of it, and then you can rent land. So there's people out there that own land and you can put the house on it. And in the end, you have the house, the unit that you own, but you only have a small amount of rent land, which is a lot more affordable than paying a mortgage. Then once you want to move on, you can sell the unit to someone else, and that acts as a really good stepping stone to actually buy your first home, because in the end you were able to reduce your expenses and you could get into the regular housing market. So first home buyers, that is one side of thing, one side of the problem really that tiny homes are solving. The next problem is usually older people that are looking to downsize, so they can't maintain a full-size property and they want to live in something that they don't have to clean as much, and they can live in, and they maybe have 2 bedrooms and that's all they need, or maybe just 1 bedroom. And in the end, it's a nice house that they can happily live in on a day-to-day basis. So tiny homes, for that perspective, people are downsizing in their older ages, also very effective. Then the third part is Airbnb rentals or short-term rentals, holiday stays. Very popular because it is something different. It's not just a regular house, it's an experience. They're not that expensive to build or expensive to acquire. Because of that, the ROI is much higher than if you're building a regular house that you are renting out on a short-term perspective. So there's a lot of Airbnb businesses that are popping up that are building tiny homes, and then they're actually working together with the landowner to put the homes on the space. So they then are doing a profit sharing arrangement where they provide the unit, the landowner gets a share of the cut, and in the end everyone has a great experience together with the person that is staying there for the short-term perspective. So it's Airbnbs, seniors downsizing, and people getting into the industry or getting into the home space that are first home buyers. So, and in the end there's different applications to tiny homes. There's the tiny homes on wheels, which I would say is the most eccentric part of the movement, just simply because it is so very different, and you will
it's like
people that are,
it's like a reemergence. It's like a reemergence of that like gypsy lifestyle.
yes.
I mean, it's really pretty close, and maybe you're not supposed to say gypsy anymore. I don't know, but that's a way to describe the lifestyle of moving about the countryside in wheeled caravans. And so, but it strikes me how in just listening to you kind of list off those three primary reasonings, just how important it is for the sale of the tiny home itself that these things are charming and they are novel, right? Like
Yes.
there is a discoverability. Obviously the outside, even the one that's behind you there, in your yard there in Auckland, even the one that's behind you there, it's charming. It's good looking. Obviously, you've got the looks like board and batten and maybe some like a metal roof. I can't exactly tell.
Yeah, board and batten metal roof. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like it's charming. It's like color matched more or less, pretty close, and it kind of matches with styles, and it has the nice wood trim. So like you get the charming features, and then I think the novelty, of the discovery, inside of like how do you pack all of the things you need for a life, for a home, for living and relaxing and cooking and sleeping and having guests, and like how do you pack all that into a space? And it's much the same novelty that you get out of a really nice RV, or
Yes.
it's like that same type of like discoverability. But in each of those scenarios, I think what it does for the customer is the fact that they're charming and the fact that they are novel gives you the social cachet, right? To do, and we just almost use the code words, in as a turn of phrase now, and we forget that they're kind of like marketing words. Downsizing and right sizing are like marketing terms so that you can sell people something, right? The term downsizing is a real estate term to sell more houses to empty nesters, so that like inventory turns and prices always rise and there's always demand. And so, I think that whether it be in the case of that sort of downsizing, whether it be in the case of the affordability itself, I think as the shed industry or new tiny home purveyors, right? People who are considering, adding this to their adding these tiny homes or partial build outs or whatever that might be to your lineup, the product offering that you have. I think continue to understand that the novelty and the charm is the social construct that allows people to feel good about this, right? That allows people to not have any kind of shame or anything else about saying like, I can't afford, I cannot afford the starting price of a home, right? Or I cannot take care of the house that I have, right? I think that we need to keep those things in mind, because I think that tiny homes are very much, they're tied to people's psychology and sociology, and like we need to feel much better about the place where we cook and relax and watch TV and lay our heads at night. We need to feel a lot better. It's a much more emotional thing than it is to the place where the shovel doesn't get rusted, right? So like we all need to keep that in mind as we keep tiptoeing into this market, because I know the industry has a tendency to be very practical, very literal, very like feature oriented, very, all the kind of hard statistics that you can say about things. And we just need to keep in mind that so much of the ADU tiny home, you say granny flat, we say granny pod. I like granny flat better. It's more charming. Start calling them granny flats, people, right? You sound British, you sound fancy,
That's what we say down here in New Zealand. So.
The roots, the British roots. And so, take little notes of those things that continue to build that emotional connection. Because as the industry continues to transition, you just have to play a slightly different note for those types of customers. And so I think that's a great lesson that you just covered, just through your natural process of explanation that is so relevant. So, we've been on for probably 45 minutes. I don't know. I didn't start a timer, but I would really like for, I know a lot of you out there will be listening to the audio version of the podcast, but if you don't mind, Till, if you would give us like a 5, 10, 15 minute, like whatever you feel is valuable, to the listeners, and just kind of give us a little bit of screen share where maybe even if you're listening, you can go maybe and check out YouTube and just see what this looks like. Because as you're saying, in a lot of ways, it is almost an IKEA, designer, IKEA builder. It's just based on pre-existing parameters that allows you to flow through it in a much less frustrating way than putting together one of those flat packs.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. Love to share, of course, on my end. And I'm aware that a lot of you that are listening are not going to be able to see this. So I will just try to describe as much as possible. And of course, yeah, if you do end up watching it on YouTube, you will be seeing my screen on that side as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen now. So I'll just quickly... Is that popping up on your side, Cord?
Yep, I got you. Looking good, Tim.
Awesome. So this is our website here, tinyeasy.com, and I will just walk you through the homepage to kind of show you the different modules and solutions that we have specifically, and then I will dive into each one of them and try to keep it as short as possible so it is as palatable as possible for you guys. So like I already said, we specifically operate in the tiny home space. So we don't work in the shed space, but we work on tiny homes on wheels, which are the trailer-based homes, modular homes, prefab homes that can go all the way up to 2,000 square feet that are built in a factory and shipped on site with even different parts to them and then are assembled back on the site, so you can do that as well. Cabins, granny flats or granny pods, and ADUs, additional dwelling units, or accessory dwelling units. So that's all what we cover specifically. And like I said before as well, we cover different parts of the sales journey. So we cover getting the lead on your website. Then once the lead is in the door, being able to design something that is customized, or if you're a newer builder, you can use the same tooling to build out your model range to think about what should your different floor plans be, creating renders for the client, creating proposals, and of course creating PDF plans, and then later on handing that all off to construction or to further planning requirements. And that could again be PDF plans, 3D model exports, and further information that you need to explain what is it that you have designed for the client specifically. And so just getting into the modules here, the way TinyEasy works is you don't have to use all of this tooling. You can use only parts of it. So we see businesses using only the configurator on their website, or they use all of the tools, or they only use, let's say, the designer and the renders and the proposal builder. So it really depends on what problem that you're looking to solve. So just going into the configurator, this is similar to shed configurators, only that it's built specifically for the tiny home space. And I will show you a couple of different examples here. So just to give you something different, I will show you a tiny home on wheels builder. This one here is actually based out in Brisbane. So we'll travel to the other side of the world, to Australia. And
right.
So these are the tiny homes that they're building here. So really nice finishes, high quality, craftsmanship. And the way they work, they specifically have different offerings. So they've got tiny homes on wheels, but they also have prefab homes, which they call tiny mansions, which are actually bigger homes that are either on a trailer or they can be delivered directly on the site, and you would have a slab that is poured there and it's popped onto the slab. So it's more of a traditional ADU approach almost. So what you'll see here, they've got different models for different purposes. So you can already see, okay, these are the different kind of spaces that you can explore. Some of those here are pictures, some of those are renders actually created with our systems as well. And then you can see the configurator that they have installed on their website. And I'll just quickly jump ahead to the configurator that opens up. So this is their configurator experience, and first guides them into the journey with a welcome experience, explaining what even is a configurator to the customer, because that might be the first time that they have seen this. Then talking about the sales journey itself. So once you have designed something here, you will then go into the next stages of our sales process where we will talk about the design with you and see how it works and how we can make it work for your project. And then it gives the user some instructions on how to actually use the software. And so this is what it looks like once you actually go into the configurator here. So what you'll see, it's slightly different to shed configurators. So we'll have models. Instead of choosing the style and then the size of the shed, we choose from the model or the floor plan that we want to pick. So for example, here they've got the more traditional tiny homes on wheels, and they have Australian names. So this is a bit different to you guys possibly. And then we've got the other bigger ADU style models that we can pick from here as well. So let's say we'll pick the bigger one here, the Soma, and this is again a full house design. Essentially, this one here actually comes on a trailer, and you've got a bigger porch here on the outside. And then the way it works, once you have picked the design that you want, first of all, you always see how much does it actually cost, and then you can start to configure the design. And this is something that would live on your website, and this is what the customer would experience. And the customer would go through a few different steps of pre-configured options. And so this is always custom for every single business because it depends on the floor plans that you're selling. So you're not just necessarily creating a plug and play configurator, but the configurator is tailored to the model and how it changes depending on the floor plan. And so we've got a modular configurator system with different steps that we can reuse to make it work specifically for each model and each business. So let's say we can start out with mirroring the design using the mirror step. Then we can choose from the primary cladding or siding, and this would have, let's say, a corrugate profile with the different manufacturer colors that they offer, or you can have a trapezoid, steel cladding here, or steel siding on the side as well. So let's say we actually go with something lighter like this here. Then we can pick our flashings or our trim to mix and match that. Then we can choose our feature cladding, which is the one up front here. So it is preset to a composite cladding. So if you downgrade to a corrugate, you can actually see the price giving you a discount here. Or we can go for a full cedar look here. Let's say we'll pick the lighter beechwood composite cladding. Then we can choose from our door and window color. We can choose our window type. In this case here, because it is an Australian business, we either have single glazing or double glazing, which is all that you need over there because of the mild temperatures. We can add skylights here. Or then once we have picked our exterior, we can choose to configure our interior as well. So this is kind of where it goes further, because in the end it is a home and you've got different rooms and different parts to the interior that you need to change. And usually this is going to be different colors and finishes again as well to kind of pick what is it that you like. So let's say we'll go for this darker style here. Then we can choose our color here in the loft as well, so that they've got a sleeping loft up here. So this could be a carpet or again a timber. So we'll go with the carpet here. Then we can choose from our interior wall colors, which could be a VJ paneling, or we could have plywood, or we can have plasterboard. So we'll just go with the VJ groove panel here. Then we can have a plywood ceiling if we want, or we can keep a matching VJ panel. Then we can choose our cabinetry colors, which again, this is fully customized for every single business because every business has a different amount of offerings that they have. So let's say you can have an oak cabinet here with a green top, and then we can choose from our range of countertops, which could either be a laminate or a full stone counter or a more composite counter here. And then we can choose our handles, our sink. So this is a more in-depth configurator, I would say. So you can also have much more simple configurators that just show here are our models, here are a couple of different options you can choose from, but this one goes into basically all possible categories that you could customize. And usually what we see, just to go back to some statistics that might be interesting for business owners, really what we're seeing is the main use case for configurators in the small home space is engagement, getting people to interact with the model range, spending time, falling in love, and basically choosing your model range over another builder that has a different model range that may not have that interactive experience. So we're seeing on average around 20 minutes of users spending time on a platform. So on average 20 minutes instead of possibly 2-3 minutes on the regular homepage. So it's a lot more time spent. And also a fairly healthy conversion rate between 2 to 8%, depending on the homes that you're offering and the price point that you have. It really depends on industry, but it's a good amount of people going from the configurator and then converting to actually putting in their contact details. So the use case is A, engaging the customer, and B, getting leads through it. But what we're seeing, once you then actually interview the customers, it's very unlikely that you'll ever end up with a customer that has not used your configurator and has understood something that they would have otherwise not have. And it really differentiates you having a system up on your website that customers can explore.
Oh no!
Sam, what's going on? Are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine, Lisa. I was just trying to get a screwdriver and all this other stuff fell down. I'm ready to go buy a shed so we can have some space in this garage again.
I agree. I keep looking at the shed Mr. Jenkins bought. Let's ask him where I got his.
Howdy, neighbor. We're wondering, how do you like your shed?
I love it. It's exactly what I needed, and I couldn't have asked for better service.
And where did you get it?
I can't remember, but let me check. Something this nice will probably have the builder's name on it somewhere. No, I'm sorry. I can't find a name anywhere.
Well, we finally got a shed.
Yes, I just hope we're happy. The thing is a lot more shoddy than I expected, and I'm sure I told them I wanted a window, but they didn't have it in the paperwork, so I couldn't argue. Boy, is this a lousy shed. We haven't even had it 2 years, have we?
Barely. It was just a bad deal all the way around. Mr. Jenkins told me the other day that he likes his shed so much he wants to get a second one, but he still can't remember where he got it.
Your product is your best advertising. At Identigrow, we provide nameplates that ensure your quality products are never forgotten. Identify your products, grow your business. For more information, visit identigrow.com.
Or give them a call at 540-283-9193.
Well, I think too, just for those listening, I would encourage, if you're able to go to YouTube and watch this on the Shed Geek Podcast YouTube channel. Number one, subscribe. We always appreciate that. But number two, just so for you listening, one of the big differences here is that this configurator is done much more of a module style where you are walking through from model to exterior to interior to upgrades, and you're kind of watching yourself walk through a process as you're being asked questions about your preferences. So, I think that is certainly a more intentional choice. It plays into the sales process, like you're saying. I mean, you really are almost prompting some of the questions that traditionally, like salespeople would actually be the ones prompting a lot of the time, and you're kind of giving people the immediate payoff. Like we all wish that we could get this good of a lead form, right? Where someone has taken the time to give you really great answers about, what all they want, in their shed or tiny home, right? But you have to draw it out of them. And I think this tool that kind of presents these things with a little bit of a narrative while you are building and ask intentional questions does a good job of that. I also presume that you probably get away from the side panel, what we see in the shed industry a lot more, which is the panelized side, because the nature of this, the intricacy of the tiny home and the different configurations and the rendering, I would say that you're probably also just keeping people from kind of going wild, right? Am I barking up a little bit of a right tree on just the performance of the builder itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're doing differently, and this is also more of a user experience approach and making sure that it actually works for the people that are trying this out and designing something, rather than giving them the tools to design anything. We give them a very limited amount of choices so they don't get overwhelmed, and also they don't design something that's not possible, because in the end, with with tiny homes, you have pre-designed something that works, and moving some things will simply break the design and it will no longer have a feasible layout. So really what we're doing, giving the customers a layout experience that they can go through and understand this is what it looks like, and then they can choose from options to tailor the look and feel, possibly some small amount of pre-designed layout options. But then once you do want to have further layout changes, that is something that you would do later on together with a salesperson, which is also what we have tooling for, which is more the IKEA kitchen planner approach. But essentially to the customer, we give a limited experience that they can't mess up, essentially. It's
Right.
something that will work for them, and you always end up with something that is pleasant to look at, and it is buildable, and you can actually price it as well.
Right. The expectation, right? The expectation is always aligned because they haven't just designed something that is then not technically feasible, so
Yes.
that you then have to, I mean, we all know how that is. Gosh, you just break somebody's heart if they feel like they could have something and then you have to tell them it's not
Yeah.
possible. You know, like you might as well not even be selling,
Yeah.
selling tiny homes or sheds anymore because you've done, told somebody something that you can't do or whatever. So, no, that makes a lot of sense. And just again, I would encourage anyone listening to go and watch Till actually walk through that process, because the user experience is really nice. It is, as you choose as you make a selection into each of the questions, you get the automatic perspective change. So you go from kind of, looking at the primary decision that you're making, you select that change, and then it moves you over to the next one. So it's got a nice flow to it. It's not jarring, it's not whiplash, but it's just very subtle. It's very intentional. And again, it feels, people, and this is, you just got to get the vibes going a little bit on these in this tiny home world, because it feels charming and it feels novel. And like, this is the experience that people want to have, with this type of purchase that they are considering. So, Till, I just want to get one more question in, because for those people who are considering, kind of expanding, adding this to their product line, who are really thinking about this, like, what are you seeing? Because you're obviously at the forefront. I know you've talked about what we call park models. In the US, they get called park models a lot.
Yes.
The tiny homes on wheels, as we've said, maybe just an updated version of a caravan from the old world, from somewhere in the Rhineland. And 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 so, like, what do you see as being the sort of trends, if someone were to consider, like, what would your advice be on, like, going after the things that seem to be hot or seem to be, I mean, look, if we're diversifying products, it's because we want to sell them. So, like,
Yes.
what are the things that are going out there if somebody just wanted to start to explore and dip their toes in to this market a little bit?
Love it. I'm going to give an it depends answer. So I would say it really depends on where you are and what state you're in and what trends are popular. Again, based on the state. But I'd say the key industries that are interesting are park models, specifically in the US, just simply because they are bigger, they have the space. You don't necessarily get restricted too much to smaller homes. So if you're looking for more long-term stays, that's where park models are really interesting. The tiny homes on wheels, the smaller tiny homes on wheels, are definitely more niche. And you will find some builders that are doing really great work in it, but I would say the biggest interest is going to be in the park models, but also in the ADUs, which are either pre-built in a factory and then shipped out to the site, or some even build them directly on the spot, more as a traditional building approach. That completely works as well. But I'd say that, yeah, the main interest, I guess, in the more areas that you serve specifically, I would say would be the park models and the granny pods and ADUs that I would say is most popular, just simply because it's more feasible to a bigger range of clients,
Right.
while the tiny home on wheels movement is definitely getting bigger, and there's more legislations and more ruling around it that makes it easier to make something that is actually legal and in the end. But a more traditional approach will definitely be more popular in more areas, and more people can identify with that, because building something in a backyard and putting in a unit that is more permanent and becomes part of the property is easier to understand than something that is possibly on wheels. But I would say the park models are more popular for tiny home parks, for example, or more where you've got more of those models living together. That's
Right.
more popular on that side. So yeah, the more traditional approach for adding additional living space will be the ADU approach, while the park models would be the more extended version of the tiny homes that are more popular. But again, it really depends on where you go, where you are based as well.
Yeah, and where, do you live in a particularly or are there some particularly beautiful areas around you where you have these Airbnb
Yes.
almost resorts. People are calling them micro resorts. I don't think that that we've landed on a term that like is universal at this point. But yes, where they're living together. There's a bunch of these things living together, and it's a business. And as a business owner, if you're investing, you then want to be able to pull these things away. I know for myself and my wife, I mean, we're pretty seriously considering going on and putting up like a large, like a wedding venue, 350, 400 person wedding venue. But then what needs to come along with that is, obviously you need places for people to stay. People come into town, the bridal party, they may be there for 3 days, depending on, how outlandish of an event or how long of an event you're having. But, and so, for the main venue space, obviously we want to do a fixed, 350, 400 people, right? Like we're going to do like a large fixed structure, but then it just makes sense as we've like worked through, kind of business plan type of decisions. Why would we not go ahead and get the movable version of a tiny home, so that if that changes, if we want to add on a second ceremony site or something like that, well, we can just easily hook up to those. And I think you've even shown some here in your presentation and on your website. But it's become pretty. There are a lot of designs that do a really good job of making that park model, making that sort of trailer based home or ADU or whatever you want to call it, really look nice. I mean, yes, it has wheels. Technically it is, on wheels. It has a tongue on a trailer to pull it, but there's some pretty slick ways to kind of cover it up that look really good. So, Till, thank you so much, man. I feel like we need to just keep you on speed dial as this industry keeps like marching forward here in the U.S. You obviously have such a history in it, and a great product here, no doubt about that, but also just a wealth of knowledge about kind of what the state of the movement and the industry is, and a very eclectic view on that. So thank you very much for being a guest today. Best way for any listeners to get in touch with you. Obviously, if you're out there, you always know you can reach out to myself or Shannon. All of the different contact methods, will be happy to put you in touch. But what's the best way just to get to you directly, Till?
Love it. Yeah. Again, thank you so much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, if I could talk for at least another 3 hours with you, I would say like we both love this space, But anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, just to get in touch with me, our best way to contact us would definitely be on our website, tinyeasy.com. So it's tinyeasy.com. And what you can do there, you can book a call with me. So there is a big book a demo button button. Once you go through that, you can book a time with me and I will speak to you directly. But otherwise, you can also contact me in the contact section. You've got my WhatsApp number there, so you can directly call me or give me a text and I'll be in touch with you right away there. So if you've got any questions or you just want to learn more about the industry, I'm super happy to just have a chat with you. So that could, be either on the phone or directly via a one-to-one call similar to what we're doing really at the moment. Right. I can just, see what, where you are at and if there's anything that we can do to help on our side. Of course, happy to get in touch there on that side too.
All right. Awesome. Well, I encourage anyone, Till, this is our second call. It's been great to get to know you. And I know that you are just as wrapped up, in the industry, in the movement, in all things tiny home, the same way that, listeners of a niche podcast about sheds and portable buildings are wrapped up in their industry and wanting to know everything and stay on top of trends, and be ahead, really be plugged in. So, I've had a great time getting to know you, and I would encourage the listeners to just give you a call, because, it's the kind of fellowship that is just good. It's just good to learn. It's good to have friends, and it's good to be with people who are excited about what they're doing every day, and who have a good time with it, and who love it. And, we should all be so lucky, to surround ourselves, with that every day. So I appreciate you, Till. And I would like to invite you back. Let's do this again in 6 months or a year, and just give us you can just turn into the market reporter for Tiny Easy, the international correspondent for tiny homes. Till Buch.
Till Buch. Absolute pleasure, Cord. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Till. Have a good one.
You too.
Today's Friday edition of the Shed Geek podcast was brought to you by Shed Geek Marketing. If your company is looking to increase leads, strengthen your brand presence, improve digital visibility, or simply stop wasting money on marketing that doesn't work, you're in luck. Shed Geek Marketing was built specifically for this industry and has assembled the absolute best providers from across the country that, bottom line, bring you the results. From dealer startups to nationwide manufacturers, we help businesses connect better, market smarter, and grow with intention. Interested in becoming a title sponsor of the Shed Geek podcast or advertising across the Shed Geek Media Network? Reach out today at info@shedgeek.com and ask for the 2026 Shed Geek Media Kit. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on the Shed Geek podcast.